Okay, this is your complete guide to the waiver wire in week 6. To be honest with you, this week isn't super deep, so we're not going to break this down to both running back and wide receiver. I'm actually going to include every single position in this video, starting off with the players that you can safely drop. Now, I'm recording this at a halftime of the Chiefs game. It does look like Carson Steele's someone you can drop. He actually lost a fumble trying to give... I don't even know what that play was, but Steele probably is never going to hit the football field again at half. He has 2 carries for -1 rushing yards. Obviously, Kareem Hunt looks like the 3-down back. Cut Steele. Jalen Naylor obviously was a cut for us last week, but somehow still rostered in 12% of leagues. Jalen Naylor plays 56% of the snaps this week, 21% the week prior. But over the past 2 weeks with Addison back in, he has had a total of 2 targets. Cut him if you have him. Andre Yoshivas is actually a receiver that obviously crushed early in the season, where he had 2 receiving touchdowns back in week 2. You had the receiving touchdown back in week 3 against Washington, even when you had a fully healthy T. Higgins. Well, he had 5 passing touchdowns, all the passing volume in the world in Cincinnati this past week. Yoshivas actually only sees 1 reception for 39 receiving yards in a game where Joe Burrow throws 5 passing touchdowns. So pretty safe drop with everything going through Higgins as well as Chase. Cam Akers, pretty safe drop as well. This is the best game that he's had all year with 12.7 fantasy points. But looking at the underlying snap data, you only had 32% of the snaps in a game where Joe Mixon missed. Now, reports on Monday were saying that Mixon is still not guaranteed to be playing this week. But would you start Akers after seeing this? No, you just simply are never going to be able to start Akers, regardless of if Mixon is good to go or not, which definitely I thought that was a different situation back against Minnesota. I actually played him. Ezekiel Elliott, definitely another player you can drop. This 3 straight weeks where he's had fewer than 40% of these snaps in Dallas. Really looks like Dowdle is locked and loaded to be the starting running back here. Justice Hill, another safe drop. Obviously, the argument that you have for Hill is when you have Lamar Jackson dropping back a ton with a ton of Lamar Jackson pass attempts, Justice Hill would be an interesting option given the fact that Derrick Henry is not used as a receiver. Well, Lamar Jackson, almost 400. Lamar, historic game throwing the football for his career this past week. And Justice Hill get 1 reception for 8 receiving yards. And Keaton Mitchell's about to come. Justice Hill sent him to the waiver wire. Trey Tucker, definitely not as easy of a drop as these other names. But with Tucker, I didn't want to pick him up off waivers last week, surrounding the idea that he is the 3rd option in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And that's assuming you have no Devontae Adams. If there's any shot Adams comes back, Trey Tucker goes back to being the 4th option in the worst offense in the league. So in my mind, probably shouldn't have rostered him last week. Probably not rostering him this week. He's coming off a game with 2 receptions for 18 receiving yards. And I just simply never trust him in an offense that's this bad. Now, moving over to some streaming defenses before we get to the waiver wire pickups. The Chargers could be an interesting defense this week. They are going up against the Denver Broncos coming out of a bye. They are heavily favored in this game. And obviously the Broncos are a team that has a strong defense. But offensively, Bo Nix has, I want to say, 3 touchdowns through the first 5 games this year. That's passing touchdowns. So really, with the Chargers, they want to win games by playing good defense and by running the ball consistently. Through the first 4 weeks before the bye, they were sitting here with a total of 11 sacks. So I'm completely fine playing the Chargers. Only rostered in 8% of leagues. The Indianapolis Colts have been a whatever defense so far this year. Obviously, they allow a ton of points to the Jacksonville Jaguars this past week, but they get to go up against Mr. Pick Six, Mr. Turnover Machine, Will Levis, where right now, while you aren't getting the consistent low points against, you do have 12 sacks through the first 5 weeks. I'm going over for the Houston Texans. I typically like playing defenses that are heavily favored in their games. And obviously the Texans over the past 2 weeks have been very disappointing as a defensive streamer, where you've only had 4 total points. But going up against the New England Patriots this week, I don't care if Drake May's under center. I don't care if Jacoby Brissett's under center. The fact of the matter is this is the worst offensive line, or one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, with one of the worst wide receiver cores in the NFL. So Texans would be a great streaming option. The Atlanta Falcons going up against the Carolina Panthers. It looks like Carolina may be back to being Carolina. Plus you have no Thielen. Plus you potentially have no Xavier Legette in this game. So everything's just going to be funneled through Deontay Johnson. So Atlanta has been a very bad defense so far this season in terms of pressures, where right now you only have a total of 5 sacks through the first 5 weeks. So even though it's a great matchup against Carolina, I definitely would way prefer picking up like Houston. Now going over and looking at the waiver wire options, what I'm going to do for you here is I'm going to rank these guys from least appealing to most appealing pickups. And at the same time, I'm going to give you my updated ranking of them over there on flogfantasy.com to illustrate exactly how excited you should be for them. Now, of course, if you ever wanted to look at my rest of season rankings, I'm updating them literally every single day over on flogfantasy.com. Plus, on the site, you can actually check out a bunch of really cool tools for free. The number one thing I'd recommend you doing is if you play on Sleeper, Yahoo, or ESPN, is actually linking your fantasy football league with flogfantasy.com. You can do it for completely free, and you can see an updated power rankings of every team in your league, plus their records, etc., etc. Really cool way to look at it. Plus, we have the free trade calculator over there for you where you can put in your exact league settings, where we have everything dialed in for your league in particular. And we have a trade finder for free where you can always go through and you can look at trades that are happening in real fantasy football leagues as well. I'll leave a link for you in the description and the comment section. But like I said, everything over there is free outside of if you wanted to get behind the paywall on a couple certain things. But anyway, looking at our first waiver wire pickup, do not pick him up. Darius Slayton may appear on a waiver wire video or two this week. Don't bother. Yes, he has a massive blow-up game with 26 points. Yes, he plays a season high 90% of the snaps. Yes, he has 11 targets. Box score looks great, but he had no Malik Neighbors. Neighbors will come back in. Large sample, Darius Slayton not viable in fantasy. Nothing changes. I don't want the third option in a very bad offense. This is the Trey Tucker scenario. Yeah, you'll have some random spikes, but not something I can rely upon consistently. Don't pick up Darius Slayton. Our next pickup is going to be Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson actually does give you a decent week this past week where you have him as the wide receiver one here in Arizona over Marvin Harrison. You've had a couple decent weeks from Wilson here. The second game where he's had double-digit fantasy points. The reality is Harrison will continue to expand his role. Trey McBride will be very interesting as well. And Wilson actually sees a season low, or at least close to season low in percentage of snaps played, down at 72%. So Michael Wilson, maybe somebody that other people are interested in. I'll probably pass on him. And then Jordan Whittington, we had him as a waiver wire pickup last week for your deeper leagues. Another player that I'll probably pass on. Obviously, if you're playing in a deeper league, he is viable. Back-to-back weeks with over 90% of the snaps here in Los Angeles. 10 targets, 7 receptions, and 89 receiving yards. Hook 'em horns, you know how to root for our guy. But the reality is you're going into the bye week in week 6, so you're not going to be able to use him then. And at the same time, reports are that Cooper Kupp may be good to go by week 7. So looking at this, Jordan Whittington, we have down at wide receiver 63 in our rest of season rankings. I would rather have someone like Quentin Johnston on my team. Going over to our next player, Colby Parkinson is also a tight end streamer that some people may be looking at. I'm going to have him down at tight end 20. While he does have a great week this past week, I really don't know if you should waste your time with him. Yes, he had the 13 targets. He had the 7 receptions. The thing is, you're going into the bye week in week 6, so you would have to roster 2 tight ends if you're going to do this. And you're also going to get Cooper Kupp back potentially in week 7. So the target share is going to dramatically go down for Parkinson. So none of those guys I'm super interested in. Now, this is where we get to the point of the video where actually I am, my ears are perking up, whatever it is called. These are the guys that I'm looking at. Caleb Williams, I actually dropped in the Flock League back, I want to say, after week 2. But this is now his first game in his career where you actually get over 20 fantasy points. You not only have the passing volume, where we saw back in week 3, him have 363 passing yards and multiple passing touchdowns. But this week, we get the 34 rushing yards added on. And this week, it's actually with efficiency rather than volume. Back in week 3, you had 52 passing attempts for Caleb Williams to give you the 300 passing yards and to give you the 2 passing touchdowns, but it came with 2 interceptions. Here against Carolina, Caleb Williams actually gave you the 300 passing yards off of only 29 pass attempts with 0 interceptions. It was by far and away the best game of Caleb Williams' career so far. And at the same time, it does make sense knowing that this is going to be a rookie that probably continues to improve as the season goes on. You had Keenan Allen added back into this offense. Rome Odunze is a rookie that probably continues to improve as the season goes on. So I think Caleb is definitely a very exciting quarterback to pick up. My issue is, like in the Flock League, I currently have Anthony Richardson and Brock Purdy. I moved Caleb Williams up to QB 19 in our rest of season ranks. He's in the same range as Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, and Geno Smith. Now going over to Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is right in the same range as well. He's directly ahead of these other guys, but obviously Cousins coming off a monstrous game, 509 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. It was immaculate. Now, the issue is Kirk Cousins could potentially lead the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns when it's all said and done and still not be an elite quarterback in fantasy. The reason for this is just going out there and picking up 30 rushing yards makes all the difference. If you're a quarterback that can pick up 30 rushing yards a game and get a rushing touchdown every other game, that's an additional 6 fantasy points per contest with your rushing statistics, which if you do the math of it, we'll do it in my head real quick. I think that's 150 total passing yards added on. So when Cousins is sitting here so far this year with a total of -2 rushing yards, definitely can't say that he's like a super exciting fantasy option if you're in a 4-point passing touchdown format. I do have him behind the other quarterbacks that will have less passing volume, but more rushing upside, such as Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields. And I'm behind somebody like Brock Purdy, where the passing volume may not be as much, but you at least get a little bit of rushing. Now, Jalen Tolbert is a very interesting pickup at wide receiver. We have Jalen Tolbert ranked at wide receiver 53, which I know seems very low. Head over to the site. You can see how many strong wide receivers there are. We have Tolbert right in the same range as Wan'Dale Robinson, Keenan Allen, and Calvin Ridley. And if you are looking at Jalen Tolbert, this is a wide receiver that gives you the 10 targets, the 7 receptions, the 87 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. A perfect stat line, not only with the efficiency, but also with the usage and also the massive play at the end of the game. Now, with this being said, this is going to be a short shelf life. Where Jalen Tolbert is viable is in the games where you have no Brandon Cooks. Because the first 4 weeks that Brandon Cooks was here, Jalen Tolbert had 2 targets, 9 targets, 5 targets, and 3 targets. So Tolbert had been sitting with 19 targets through 4 weeks. He was averaging slightly fewer than 5 targets per contest. Now Tolbert is in flex consideration with no Brandon Cooks, who is on the IR. It's not going to be there for a very long time. I'm more interested in Jalen Tolbert if you're playing in a 12-team format with multiple flex spots. Like the Flock League, it's a 12-team league, start 2 receivers, 2 flexes. There, Jalen Tolbert is definitely appealing. But if you're in like a 10-team league where you start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, there's really no reason for you ever to pick up Tolbert. You're not going to play him. Now, Josh Downs, I know it's going to seem like he's pretty low when we talk about the other guys with this video. Obviously, he has looked great. With Josh Downs, wide receiver 46 in our rest of season ranks, right around the same range as Keon Coleman, Dontavian Wicks, Jacoby Myers. If you look at Downs over the past 2 weeks, he's had 21 targets. He's been averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game. Now, the issue is, over the past 2 weeks, you've had Joe Flacco. We're probably going to get Anthony Richardson back in either week 6 or week 7. The Colts will transition to being a much slower paced offense. The Colts will transition to being more of a rush first offense, especially as Jonathan Taylor gets added back in. And Josh Downs will be fighting for targets with Pittman and one of the lowest volume passing attacks in the NFL. So Downs, great player. If you knew you had Flacco rest of season, Downs would fly up my rankings. But the reason he is this much lower than the other guys in the waiver wire video is just because of the quarterback situation going into the future. Now, going over to Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison obviously plays this week against Denver with no Zamir White. He does see 57% of the snaps, which is encouraging. And remember, before Zamir White was ruled out, we already had the coaching staff coming out saying Alexander Mattison has deserved more playing time. And with Mattison, you get a season high 15 rush attempts. You get 3 targets as well, so a total of 18 opportunities. Now, the issue with this is you're playing for the Raiders. When you're playing for the Raiders, this will be a very inefficient offense. You will not have a ton of trips to the red zone, so the touchdown upside may not necessarily be there. For me to be excited about playing a running back in a backfield like this, we need to either have one of 2 things. 1, a phenomenal talent profile where the talent of the running back can overcome the overall lackluster appeal of the offense. Alexander Mattison is not that guy. Or 2, raw volume and volume alone. This is the playbook that you had from James Robinson way back his rookie season in Jacksonville, where it's a garbage offense, a running back that's not that talented, but you're seeing 90+% of the opportunities in the snap, so it doesn't matter. You're going to crush in fantasy regardless. Alexander Mattison hasn't seen more than 60% of the snaps in a garbage offense. And at the same time, I don't know, Alexander Mattison is a running back that I don't believe is that top talent. Now, going over to our next running back, Antonio Gibson fits this same mold here. Antonio Gibson is trending in the right direction where pretty much every single week he has been playing more and more snaps. You go from 22% to 24% to 37% to 34% to 47%. So Gibson's usage is trending in the right way. Technically, Antonio Gibson was the starting running back for the New England Patriots this past week. But with that being said, Antonio Gibson is a committee running back in one of the worst offenses in the league. So Antonio Gibson, probably not somebody you're excited about playing anytime soon. I'm going over to Jalen Wright. Jalen Wright would be much higher in this list. You have the Devon Achane injury. I want to say that, oh my gosh, Jalen Wright, talented running back in terms of the rookie profile he had coming out. This past week with the injury, you actually saw Jalen Wright be hyper efficient, where he's been a very efficient running back pretty much all season, where if you're looking at the year total, he is averaging over 5 yards per carry. Now, the issue is, one, Jalen Wright is going to be playing on a bye week this week. So you go ahead, you pick up Jalen Wright. He's going straight to your bench and he's clogging a roster spot. 2, if you're looking at Jalen Wright, Achane may be back by the time you get to week 7. And even if he's not, if Tua is the quarterback in this offense, people in my live streams every single night, of course, you can come ask a question, hang out in the live stream. You can always ask a question through flockfantasy.com, whatever you're wanting to do. But people every single night over the past few weeks have been saying, can I start Devon Achane? Can I start Achane? Achane looks so bad in this offense. This offense sucks. If Achane was not startable with no Tua, I don't necessarily know if that means we can go through and we can jam in Jalen Wright. So I want to be a little bit hesitant here. Ty Chandler, similar situation. Ty Chandler with the injury to Aaron Jones, I would come out here and I would label must add running back. You absolutely need the guy. Pick him up, pick him up, pick him up. Low end RB2 if Aaron Jones misses this next week. But this is the perfect bye week timing for Aaron Jones to get right. Just like it's the perfect bye week timing for Devon Achane to get right. You have the week 6 bye for Aaron Jones to get healthy. Earlier reports are already saying that Jones may be good to go. Obviously, these reports are meaningless. We really don't know until next week. So if you roster Ty Chandler, you're going to have to hold him on the bottom end of your team and really clog a spot just to maybe be able to play him in week 7. And he's not a super talented running back. If you look at the efficiency, 2.13 yards per carry in week 1, 8.2 week 2, a solid week 2, but then 1.86 yards per carry against Houston, 1.67 yards per carry against Green Bay, 2.14 yards per carry against the Jets. Doesn't have the juice and may not even have the job. Now going over to Tyrone Tracy. Tracy actually does show something this past week where Tracy comes out and you have 18 rush attempts. Looks pretty damn good, pretty efficient while doing this as well. Now, the thing is with Tracy, the usage between him and Eric Gray is massive. If you look at this PFF chart, you will see that Eric Gray played every single snap on third down. We didn't get to see the deployment of these two running backs in the 2-minute drill, but I would assume that Eric Gray would be the passing down running back for this team pretty much regardless. So if all of a sudden we map this out with the New York Giants and we go, well, okay, the Giants offense may be a little bit better than we are expecting, but this is still a Giants team that's probably going to be trailing the vast majority of their games. I think it will look a little bit more like a committee. I think it'll be a little less obvious that, oh, Tracy is just the full-blown starter. And obviously, there's the outside chance that Devin Singletary comes back soon. It's not like Singletary is sitting on the IR. Going over to our next running back, Tank Bigsby. Now, I want to sit here and I want to go, oh my gosh, Bigsby's ready to crush. And thank you, Bigsby, for the 25 points on all my underdog teams this week. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You crush it for us. But going into the future, couldn't I be super, super excited about Tank Bigsby? No, I can't. The reason being is while maybe he does earn the job and maybe he is a running back that does earn the first and second down usage and he gets to split that with ETN. He gets to split that with Dearness Johnson. Because if you look at the underlying snap data, these running backs split the backfield 3 ways, both this week and the week prior. Bigsby only played 40% of the snaps. I don't know. He's had one target all year. He's not getting used as a receiver whatsoever. So I think that would severely cap his ceiling. And Dearness Johnson's still seeing snaps, which is just making this a more crowded backfield overall. Now, Roschon Johnson will be a running back that I'm pretty damn excited about, in that with Roschon, he also saves our underdog teams. We get the 2 rushing touchdowns. You get no Khalil Herbert yet again. So confirmation that this is a backfield only between DeAndre Swift and Roschon. Now, does this mean Roschon somebody that you can start without a DeAndre Swift injury? No, you can't. He only played 31% of the snaps this past week. But what we have seen is, if DeAndre Swift were to go down, the Bears trust Roschon Johnson both at the goal line, and the Bears trust Roschon Johnson as a receiver as well. He's a great running back catching the football. He's a great running back pass blocking. So he would have the third down role if anything were to occur to Swift. Khalil Herbert probably does step in that instance and have some usage as well, but Roschon would be the guy that you'd want. The next guy that is a very exciting waiver wire pickup, if you can get him, is Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney currently only rostered in 65% of leagues. So I know the vast majority of leagues, if you're in a deeper format, yes, he's going to be on the team. Just kind of want to talk about Darnell Mooney. This is now the 3rd week this season where Darnell Mooney has had 14 fantasy points. Obviously, it's a massive blow-up spot where we get multiple receiving touchdowns. You get over 100 receiving yards. Now, with that being said, Kirk Cousins had 500 passing yards. So if you're going through the market share numbers in this offense, Darnell Mooney had about 20% of the overall passing yardage here in Atlanta. That's probably a consistent market share we should carry over to the future. So if all of a sudden Kirk Cousins, instead of having 500 passing yards, is instead sitting here with 280 passing yards, what does that look like? We're getting 56 receiving yards from Darnell Mooney, which is kind of right in line with what we had earlier in the season. So I don't think Mooney's like a must-start player every single week. I think it's a great matchup. When we have a ton of passing volume in Atlanta, Mooney can crush. We have moved him up to that like flex consideration for us. We have moved him up to wide receiver 36 in our rest of season ranks. Now going over to our next guy, Rico Dowdle will be one of the biggest running back pickups this week. Dowdle is somebody that if he's out there, blow your fab on. Only rostered in 63% of leagues. I was actually a little down on Rico Dowdle last week. I owe you a massive apology for it. We were looking at this backfield saying, oh, okay, this is maybe a 3-man running back by committee, but I don't know. Actually, he takes 20 carries this week. He has the 2 targets as well. We've seen him be used as a receiver all year now. He has 19.5 fantasy points. I think Rico Dowdle is slowly but surely not just entering in the conversation as a flex play, but more than a flex play now, possibly just as your running back 2 weekly. I moved him up in our rankings to be alongside guys like J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and Zach Moss rest of season. Now moving over to our next player, Tucker Kraft, immediate top 10 tight ends. If you didn't pick up Kraft last week, you got to get him this week. Still available in 35% of formats. Obviously, the target volume comes down just a bit, but it doesn't matter. The efficiency spikes up. I have Tucker Kraft at tight end 8 rest of season, right in the same range as Jake Ferguson and Dalton Kincaid. And then potentially based off the news that we have with Zach Moss, Chase Brown would be the number 1 waiver wire pickup. Obviously, if you play in a serious fantasy football league, Chase Brown's already rostered. He's rostered in 71% of formats right now. So I want to make sure we're on the same page. If he's out there, you get Chase Brown. Zach Moss does get injured. Sounds like Moss will be good to go, but it's a great offense. And if Chase Brown's starting running back in it, we'll have receiving usage. We'll have a 3-down roll, and he'll probably be a high-end RB2 in my rankings this next week if you have no Moss. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope that we were able to help you out. I understand that a lot of these players at the end of the video may not be available in your leagues, but yeah, definitely I'm going to go through and I'm going to update the rankings. That way you can look at them and go, okay, do I drop Alexander Madison for so-and-so? And then if you see one player higher than the other in the rankings, you go ahead and you do just that. And if you can find those rankings over on flogfantasy.com, you can use the league power standings over on the site as well. Link your team if you play on Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo. We have a bunch of free tools that you can use. Just go over to the site, link the squad, check out the trade calculator, check out the trade finder, check out your league power rankings. And obviously, if you ever wanted to ask me a question over there, you can as well. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out, and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.